So this third session is about land ownership in Ghana. I'm here with Mr. Kwaku Yeboah, also known as Augustine, for some of you who may know. So I've had another lawyer on this panel, so I need to just set the record clear because this is being recorded. It's gonna go on YouTube. Number one, sir, it's gonna feel like interrogation a little bit, but you're a lawyer, so I know you can handle it. But I have to do this so that the people know that it's serious.
Okay.
Please confirm that you are a real lawyer.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'm Augustine Kwaku Yeboah. I'm actually a lawyer called to the Ghana Bar, and I practice with Benchmark Lawyers and Associates, and I've been a lawyer for the past 4 years. This is my 4th year at the bar.
Okay, and if anybody here went to look you up, they would find this evidence.
Sure. So the firm is Benchmark Lawyers and Consultants. So that's where I've worked. I've actually worked previously with Kemathi and Partners, and then from there I moved to Benchmark Lawyers and Associates. So you can check out both firms and you see that they exist actually.
Okay, we're not finished with this interrogation.
Okay.
And would you say that you have a fairly good understanding of land laws in Ghana?
Okay, thank you. So just looking at even this audience right now, I think there are about a number of people who are my clients. And it's all real estate actually. And beyond that, I've had the chance to work on quite a number of projects, both on a large scale and then also in terms of individual engagements as well. And I can mention a couple of them, but notable amongst them currently is Shark Island, which I'm also part of the key lawyers on that project. I also, at some point, worked with the British Embassy through their development agency in my old firm, where we did a project with the Dawa Industrial Enclave, where they were looking at setting up a pharmacy hub, and we had to do a multi-stakeholder consultation. So I've had a chance to work on quite major projects and also individual purchases as well.
Okay, so are y'all here, is everybody here comfortable with that? Now that we got out the way, you know we got a real expert on the panel. He's official, he know what he's doing, he got the right documentation, he got the right paperwork, everything. All right, now let's get into the conversation. So as you can see, even in conversations not about land, land comes up. Simple question. If you are not born in Ghana, just give me a yes or no. Can you buy land?
Yes.
Okay, yes you can. All right. Because of the year of return, if you're a black person and consider yourself black and you come to Ghana, does that mean you get free land, yes or no?
No.
Okay, all right. I just want to get some stuff out the way before we get into this. So there's no free land, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
The free lands are finished. Let me put it that way.
The free land is all done.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's a thought going around that says you can never really own land in Ghana and that all land in Ghana is leasehold. Is that true?
Okay, I think that's too narrow a question. So
No, yes or no. Is all land leasehold or some is not leasehold?
Not all lands are leasehold.
Okay, simple. Stop there.
Okay.
All right. Now let's get into that. These are some of the rumors that's floating around that I just wanted to get off the break. Let's deal with these particular things. These are for the record, these are the things that come to us all the time, these questions. This is the last question that I'm gonna ask to clear the record before I go into these particular questions.
Okay.
So when you buy land in Ghana, you get an indenture.
Okay.
And oftentimes that indenture is, say, 50 years or 99 years. If you are an individual person buying land, not a business, and you are not a Ghanaian citizen, you're just an individual, you fresh out of Trenton, New Jersey, like some people I know, right?
Okay.
Or you fresh out of Newark.
Okay.
Tennessee, you from America.
Okay.
But you black as coal. Right? Can you get land that has an indenture for 99 years? Is that allowed?
So no. So non-Ghanaians cannot acquire land under leasehold for more than 50 years at a time.
Okay, perfect. If you got creative and decided to include in your indenture an automatic renewal for another 49 or 50 years, is that possible?
I would say yes.
So you can.
Yes. You know, as a whole, it comes across as going against the law because the law says you can get only 50 at a time. And I think the idea behind the law is to, in a way, ensure that people, especially for the, I would say the chiefs and the rest, from not being allowed to necessarily give out the land over very long durations. It's almost to put a check on family heads and chiefs not being allowed to necessarily pass on generational wealth and have maybe sometimes not so beneficial contract. So yes, you can put in a clause that allows for renewal, and when it gets to that time, you can have it have a conversation around it to get it renewed.
Okay, thank you. So it's my understanding that, so y'all, we getting right to the business. If you came here to learn a little something about land, this first part of the conversation is the legal aspects, and then we got some folks coming up to talk about on the ground, right, and their lived experiences, some of their best practices, things that they've had to go through, challenges, benefits, all of that stuff. The next question that I just forgot this question that I had. Oh, types of land.
Okay.
It's my understanding that that you have stooled land.
Okay.
And when you answer the question, if you can, when you answer the question, like, let us know what these things are. That you can have stooled land.
Okay.
That there could be personal land.
Okay.
Family land.
Okay.
And government land.
Okay.
Is that true that those are 4 different types of land that you can have in Ghana?
Sure, but let me give a little clarification. So
go do your thing.
I know there are lawyers here, but let me make it a bit more illustrative.
Hold on. Are you single? Ladies, this man's smart. You know what I'm saying? I'm a straight man, but he smells good too. The smell is coming over here. I'm like, hold on, bro. Let me let these ladies know in case you catch something while you delivering some knowledge. Go ahead.
So,
I'm sorry. I don't mean to put you on the spot.
So let me make this very illustrative. So
wait, which part you making illustrative?
The part on you mentioned there's 2
okay,
land government land.
All right, go ahead.
What did you say? So to make it very illustrative, so when we talk about land transaction and all of those things, understand that it doesn't involve the physical land itself. The land is there, and there's what we call the ownership. So that's the title and the interest. So what is being traded, what is being sold, what is being bought, and all of those things is just the interest in the land, the title in the land. So to your question, that is there still land?
Hold on, I want to understand this. You said it's the interest in the land.
Yes.
So that means that the land itself can never be owned? Is that kind of the thing?
To some extent, you can own an interest in the land.
Okay.
Not the land itself, you can own an interest in the land.
Okay.
Now, what you mentioned, there's 2 lands, the government lands, the individually owned lands, the family lands. Those are all different types of ownership regimes.
Okay, so let's start with the first, stooled land. Let's talk a little bit about stooled land.
So stool lands are lands that are owned by stools or skins.
By stools, you mean everybody here may not know.
Yeah, so stools, that's the chiefs. The chiefs. Now, let me clarify something. The stool itself is symbolic in a way. The stool represents the traditional authority. So the land is owned by the traditional authority, which is headed by the chief. I don't know if that clarifies.
No, that clarifies. So stool land for everybody is owned by the traditional council in that area and is headed by the chief. It is their job to kind of overlook.
Exactly.
Over
So
that
it's
land for
the
the
stool
community.
represents the more like the traditional authority in charge of that area. In the north, that's the skin. So when we say the land belongs to the stool, it doesn't belong to the chief necessarily. The chief occupies the stool. I don't know if that's
Yes, no,
clear.
no,
Okay,
go,
sure.
keep going, you're flowing.
Okay. So we can, if you want to understand how the whole chieftaincy or the stool land regime works, it will be a whole historical lecture on how so many societies were formed, because that influenced how they came to own the land. In the Ashanti region, if you read the history, there was a point where the various individual stools came together, and then they agreed, and then there was the Asante and all of that. That influenced the current regime you have in Kumasi, where the Asante is the paramount chief and is more like the supreme leader and quote unquote, and he's like the overlord of the entire area. That regime is different, even though it's still stool land. When you go to the central region, based on the evolution of their more like chieftaincy history, they also have their own regime as well. So when you talk about stool lands, even though in simple terms it's just stool land, but the various societies and regions and all of that have more like different regimes or peculiarities that you have to appreciate. But in essence, stool land essentially means land owned by the stool.
I want to appreciate that, because we talk to so many people about land and they're like, well, when I bought land in Kumasi, I didn't have to do that. Well, land in Kumasi, like you said, the stool land is a different regime than maybe Cape Coast or Quiapim. So maybe there might be a different process based on where you are, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
There'll be some differences in the processes as a whole. Yeah.
So that's a brief overview of stool land. Now let's talk about family land.
Okay. So give a little historical lecture in a way. So you realize that when it comes to the land in Ghana, the various lands, the ownership of the various lands are influenced by the history of the area as well. So in some places where maybe they had a very strong chieftaincy system, you realize that most of the lands are predominantly owned by the stool. In other areas where maybe there was not really a centralized chieftaincy regime, what you realize is that the lands are mostly owned by the families. But I have to also give a little distinction here. So what we are talking about are the more like different ownership regimes. But another key thing is the interest you have in the land. So it goes hand in hand. The interest in the land refers to your rights in the land. There is the allodial, there is the leasehold, and quite a number of others as well. But the key ones maybe for our purpose will be there's the tenancy and all of those things as well. But for our conversation, the allodial and the leasehold are the key things. Now, most of the lands owned by the families and the chiefs, they happen to be the allodial owners. But maybe let me not go into that right now. Let me not go into that. We'll get that. We'll get into this whole that one. Okay. Yeah. So family lands basically are lands owned by families. Now another key distinction is that when we say land is owned by the family, it is owned by the family as a group, but the more like the regent or the person heading it is the family head. So the land does not belong to the family head himself, or maybe mostly him. So
there's the representative.
Exactly.
The family head is the rep.
It's owned by the family as a group. When we go to the documentation surrounding land transactions, realize how key these distinctions are. That the land is owned by the family, not the family head. So that's on that.
So you can purchase family land, get signatures, and it not be the right signatures.
Yes. So for family lands, the law is that it must be signed by the family head and principal members of the family.
So hold on. Family head and principal members of the family. So I just happened to run into Pookie one day, and Pookie like, man, I'm the family head, and here go my cousin, Dre, Elijah, and Tony. Okay. And they the principal members of the family. Trust me, this is how we get down. Here goes some other documents we all sign, da-da-da-da-da. Legally, how can you find out who is the head and the primary members. Is there a way to do that legally?
Okay, so when it comes to land transactions, I think there are three things that, as a prospective buyer, you should have in mind. There's a bit of historical part, the financial part, and the legal part. And even for us lawyers, when it comes to these conversations, we don't just look at the legal part. There's a need to also look at the, you could say, societal or historical part to it. So if I met you and you mentioned that you are the family head, I need to understand how you are the family head. And that's not always a legal question. Which family is this? Okay, you are the family head. Who are the principal family members? And it can't just be 2 people. It can't just be 3 people. I'll need to know even people beyond the principal family members.
In order to ascertain that this is the correct people.
You can visit a family home as well, sometimes. So there is no necessarily legal registry that registers family heads, but the due diligence has to go beyond the law. You have to be convinced beyond reasonable doubt. Family lands are a bit tricky as compared to even individual owned lands and then chief still owned lands, because there is no central registry for family heads. And there are instances where there could be family disputes. So you have one person say, I'm the family head, but unknown to you, there's actually a dispute around the leadership of the family. You also have instances where outgone family heads still go around posing as family heads as well. So it's a conversation beyond the law. You have to be convinced, meet their family, if possible, go to their family house, have conversation with the family as a whole. And I could say in that sense, meet as many members of the family as possible and understand if it doesn't make sense, that makes sense. That's one thing I tell my clients. If you meet someone and the person is telling you, oh, I own this land, my grandfather, this, and that doesn't make sense. You need to be convinced that there's a clear chain of title. The person can tell you how his or her family became owners of the land. And are there other people in the area that have also bought from the same people? So there's a bit of actual, I would say, due diligence that go beyond the law.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And another thing is, if you meet someone, they say, okay, our family owns this land in the area. You want to speak to other people in the area to find out if indeed that family hasn't been transacting in the area at all. So, yeah.
Oh, excellent. Everybody following us? Is this informative for you? Some of y'all might already have known some of this stuff, but I'm hoping that it makes a difference in your understanding. Personal land. So my first experience with trying to buy some land one day is the indenture.
Okay.
You know, I was an English major. All English majors, we think we're smarter than most people. So I took the indenture and I reworded it.
Okay.
And I'm like, I remember the first time I remember what in perpetuity mean. That means forever and ever and ever. Right?
Okay.
Forever.
Okay.
Ever. So I put in perpetuity. I changed some language, gave it back to him in perpetuity. Basically, this is mine. He came back to me and said, they won't take it. He said, I said, what do you mean they won't take it? You know, because sometimes in Ghana, somebody say something like they won't take it. First of all, who is they?
Okay.
What do you mean they won't take it? Well, he basically was like, listen, even if you wanted me to get somebody in the Lands Commission to accept it, the title will never come. Okay. And if you meet somebody who takes your money and says that they'll get them to accept it, they're just taking your money. By the time it gets for them to register in your name, the leasehold you can never say in perpetuity. It's just not the way it works here. Okay. Is that true?
Okay. It doesn't work that way, but let me give a little context. So, leasehold is a form of title that is recognized under Ghana law. But there are different types of titles. There's a allodial, there's a usufructory, there is the leasehold, there's a tenancy, and all of that. Now, okay. A key thing that I think everybody has to walk away with is what we call the reversionary. So the allodial is the ultimate owner of the land. So he's the only one, or it could be a stool, it could be an individual, it could be a family or the government. The allodial owns the land in perpetuity. He owns it forever.
So the allodial, is that personal land?
No, so the allodia is a form of title.
Okay.
For lands that were acquired by the state, they assume the allodial ownership in it. So the land title regime is like graduated in a way. So there's the allodial, there could be usufructory, there could be leasehold, then it keeps going down. But on top of the allodial, there is none. So
if someone says they have allodial land,
yes,
then that means that they have land that indenture and that process will be different than all others, and that will be yours in perpetuity.
Yeah, but I'll come to your point. Just hold on a second.
Okay.
So the allodial owns it forever. Whenever the allodial decides to cut out a specified duration and hand it over to you, that becomes a leasehold. So a very important part of leasehold title.
Say that again.
So the allodial owns it forever. Back then, right? There was it's still there, but it's not really now as an active. There is a factory. So the allodial could be the chief. He owns the entire area. But if a member of the community goes to farm a certain part of the land, he acquires what we call the factory ownership. But that used to exist back then. Now, you wouldn't find any land like that, so I don't want to talk too much into that. But for our purpose, when the allodial decides to cut out a part of the duration and hand it over to you, you acquire a leasehold. But there is something we call the reversionary. After the duration that he has cut out, he has cut out to you, it has to revert back to him. That's what we call the reversionary interest. Unless the allodial renews it for you. Now, for a leasehold owner, you can also decide to cut out a part of your interest to another person, and that becomes a sublease. Now, the sublease, you have to leave a reversionary as well, because it has to come back to you and then go back to the allodial. However, where you want to hand over your entire leasehold interest, that becomes an assignment, not a sublease. So, to your question, if someone owns a leasehold, and there's a simple principle in law, which is you can't give what you don't own. If an allodial gives you 50 years lease, you cannot go and give someone 60 years.
Right.
You only have 50.
Only have 50.
So, I don't know who you are dealing with, but if the person had a leasehold interest, the key thing for you to look out for is how many years was he or she given by his allodial or lessor, and then what is left on it as well. That's another key thing.
He can only sell you what he has left.
What he has left. There have been instances where people have actually sold what they were given at the start of their lease when they've already probably exhausted 30, 40 years into it. So the key thing is, what was the person given and what's actually left outstanding?
So let me ask this question. Other than you, is there anybody else in Ghana who really understands land laws?
Oh, there are lots of people. There are lots of people.
You sure?
Oh,
There's lots of people that understand it. Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah.
Because I haven't had a conversation with somebody who's been able to kind of make it this simple.
Okay.
I mean, for as difficult as it is, when I say simple, the way you're explaining and breaking it down. And I know we're not going to have time to break everything down. So I'm going to make the assumption that the steps and documentation required in the legal process of purchasing land will depend on what kind of land. Is that a good assumption to make?
Very, very good assumption.
Okay. Boom. That's why you my little. So, all right. So how can we go about this? So let's talk about stool land and family land, just for now.
Okay.
Can you kind of list out the legal documentation or the process when you're buying this land, right?
Okay.
It's not like just step one, like, because most people know. How many people here bought land in Ghana? Raise your hand. Okay, excellent, 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 excellent. That's a lot of people. How many people here want to buy land in Ghana? And they haven't. Okay. Okay, that's a few more. So we know you got a survey. We know that there's an indenture. We know that you got to take it to the Lands Commission. We know that at some point you're going to try to register it and put it in your name. We know that it got to have signatures. Walk us through what a typical, if there's a such thing,
Okay.
or at least what are the standard documents in most land deals? Like no special consideration, but every land purchase should have what?
Okay. Okay. So just before I go into the legal documentation, I think there is a little background which I mostly recommend, and I have a conversation with clients before we even get into the legal, because it plays a very important role in the legal documentation and how they are negotiated. So 2 questions that should even come up before we talk about the legal documents is, why are you buying the land and how are you financing it? And maybe
Why are you buying the land and how are you financing it?
exactly. Maybe down the conversation, you may ask me a question, I'll give a little more clarity. So let's say we've dealt with the why you're buying the land and how you're financing it. Now, the next stage is the prospecting for the land. You can do it yourself.
The prospecting, is that the same as surveying?
No, so I'm looking at you looking for a land to buy itself.
Okay, okay.
So you can do it yourself or through a broker. If you are dealing with people just jump straight into the ownership documents, but I'm trying to take you a few steps back to where things start to happen. So if let's say you are looking for the land, you could be doing it yourself or through a broker. If you are doing it through a broker, you want to review your brokerage agreement or agency agreement.
You want to have one, definitely.
You want to have one. You want the agent to give it to you. And if there's an independent person you can even run it by, confirm the narrative around that particular broker. So that's number one. You're looking at whatever brokerage contract you're working with. Now, the person takes you to the land, okay, and says, this is the owner of the land. So I've spoken about the agency agreement or brokerage agreement. When the person says, this is the owner of the land, you want to now start your preliminary due diligence. Most people just do one like I would say, one stage of due diligence and they are done. But it's recommended you do 2. So your preliminary due diligence. And at that point, you want to confirm fundamentally if the person owns the land. And so what you should be looking out for are ownership documents. And ownership documents, there are several forms of documents that can prove ownership in Ghana. It could be a court judgment, it could be a certificate of purchase, it could be an indenture or a deed, it could be a land title. You have even instances where in some areas in Ghana, there are no documents on the land, especially in certain places.
In those areas, could it be that, so in my community, a lot of the families will tell me they've never taken any of the land to the commission. It hasn't been surveyed, nothing.
Yeah.
But the entire community knows this is Kojo Boateng's land.
Yeah.
This is his family land. Which mango tree? The other one.
Yeah.
That mango tree to this tree, they plant special trees and bushes to this one and this one. These are his boundaries.
Okay.
And the whole community knows it.
Yeah.
Nobody will infringe, touch it.
Okay.
Is that what you mean when you say some land and they're not in the... Okay.
Yeah. So the key thing is the ownership documents. Before you do any conversation on pricing, on your plans for some people go into these conversations and they start talking about what they have for their plans for the land, if you forget about ownership. But the key thing is the ownership documents. Now, depending on what exists on the land, there may be the need for other documentation as well. But before we go into even that at all, the key thing is the ownership document. Now, they can tell you A owns the land, and you produce maybe a leasehold document, a leasehold title, or a leasehold agreement, a lease agreement, you have to also ask for the head lease to see who
leased it to them?
who leased it to them. You have to trace the land to as far back as you can. Under the law, it's about 35 years. I mean, if you go as far as 35 years, it's reasonable, but sometimes you can go as far as you can. So that's the due diligence stage. You ask for the ownership documentation. If there's an existing building, you could ask for the permit as well. So there is the direct due diligence you do with the seller, and there's a regulatory due diligence you do with your third parties as well. So you want to also do your checks the Lands Commission, do a search on the land as well to get the folio of the land, the search results. So you have the ownership documentation. So that's a very key document when it comes to land transactions, and the search results as well from the Lands Commission as well. And they should tally. They should go hand in hand. If there's any gap in there, you should have to ask for further. Okay, I can see that from the search results I have, it shows that the land moved from A to B to C to D. The document you gave me, it just shows that you got the land from A, B, C. So where is D? Where is A? Are they around? Can I meet them? Can I speak with them?
But how would you know that there is, so let's say you get it from C.
Yeah.
How would you know that there was an A?
So that's why you go to the Lands Commission as well. Okay. So for every land document, there is a recital. So after you read the parties, the parties, the dates and everything, there's a next section which is very important, which you people skip, and it's a recital. So the recital gives the history of the land. Okay. And sometimes that is the place you can even spot that the person is lying to you. Because the recital should be able to trace the land from as far back as possible to the present owner.
So the recital will trace the land back to the first time it entered the system. Basically.
Exactly. So you may start with maybe
whenever it entered the system, it should be there.
By a lease between the family of this and this person, the land was leased to this person for 50 years. Okay. The next one will say by maybe an assignment dated this particular date, the land was transferred to this. Okay. So that's the recital. So you look for the ownership documents, you do your search as well. If it's an ongoing development, you want to also check the permit as well. So those are the due diligence stage. Now, let's say you're done with the due diligence. I don't want to go too much into detail. The next document that you will sign is a sale and purchase agreement. People skip that a lot, but that's almost like your bulletproof before parting money. So let's say you've done all your basic due diligence, ownership and all of that. You're quite convinced that he owns the land. But you may be worried that if you keep asking more questions, the person may be put off by the deal and walk away. So people go like, I want to put something down. That is when the sale and purchase comes in. It allows you to lock in the seller for a little bit longer. That should give you
lock in your rate.
What is it?
And you lock in your rate.
I didn't hear you.
Your rate.
Yeah, you lock in your price and all of those things. People sometimes skip it and just go straight to the lease or the assignment or anything of that sort. But no, sign the sale and purchase, make maybe your initial very minimal deposit, and then give yourself probably 2 weeks or a month to do as much as possible. Speak to people around the area, whoever you can speak to, bring in your colleagues, your friends, lawyers as much as possible, and all of that. After you're done with the sale and purchase agreement, you're convinced, then you sign the lease or assignment, which is the particular deed transfer, the title to you. Then you part away with the money, and then from there, you go and register that document with the Lands Commission, and you get a title certificate. Okay. So these are the key milestones.
And that's the key milestones from any purchase. Okay. What are some of the most common pitfalls that you see? Like, I'm assuming do you have people come to you after the land deal has gone bad?
Probably I get more people coming to me with bad deals than people coming to me to start the deal.
To start the deal.
Yeah.
So I guess that might answer the question when I say, what is the most common pitfall is starting by yourself. But what would you think the mistake is? Like, is it Is it that people in Ghana are just extra charming? Like, and you just listen to anything that they say, or is it like, is there a certain part of that place? Is it the survey? Is it the indenture? Is it the sales purchases agreement? Which part of that where you see the most common pitfalls, or is it one of them? Is it all of them?
Okay, so there are probably, I would say, three major pitfalls. And two of them, I mentioned them in my earlier response. One, I mentioned the way you are financing the purchase. That's number one. And then two, looking for the land. Who is assisting you? Then the third one will be the ownership. People tend to think the scam starts at the ownership stage, but no. It starts with who is helping you to look for the land.
From the beginning.
From the beginning.
Who is helping you look for the land from the beginning? Who is your broker? Who is the person helping you look for the land?
Yeah, because depending on how you go into the conversation, how you'll be very much aware. You even bring in a lawyer, the kind of lawyer you bring into the transaction, it mostly comes down to who is helping you get the land. That's your Judas, and that's also your Jonathan. He could be your best friend, or he could be the one to sell you out.
Right.
So I would say the first come is who you are going to look for the land with. Because, okay, they give you the documents. He will look at it and tell you, oh, it's good. That can on its own let you even let your defenses down. The person telling you, oh, I brought another person to him, can let your defenses come down. So even before the legal, the ownership scam comes in, the first scam is actually who is helping you. So that's number one. The second one is I mentioned the way of financing, badly negotiated deals. So let's say you are personally financing the property. You are probably currently employed, maybe in the US. People come into Ghana, let's say they are being employed, they are earning a certain amount of money. They come into Ghana, they're given a payment plan, and the payment plan is probably 50% more than what they are earning there. Now you have to think about this. Let's just say you have an issue at your workplace or something, you have to even switch jobs. Has your contract catered for that window? Is in your sale and purchase agreement, is there a window for default? How is that one? You have instances where people just sign sale and purchase agreement because, they sign it. But is there a window that allows you to renegotiate the payment plan?
Life can happen. So you can be like, I got the 50%, put the 50% down, and be like, I'll have the other 50% in 2 years. Life happens.
Exactly.
And then
people can't keep up with their properties. They can't develop, they can't finish paying. So that's another, I would say, scam or pitfall. The third one is ownership. Now, I think in the earlier conversation, there was a question around ownership of lands in Ghana. The ownership regime in Ghana is complex. I think that's a simple thing that we all have to understand. And it's complex for indigenous Ghanaians, it's complex for foreigners, it's complex for diasporans. Because there's a mix of law in there, there's a mix of war in there, there's a mix of history in there, there's a mix of religion in there. There are so many elements in the land ownership regime in Ghana that is not enough just I own the land. So under the third one will be the ownership around the land, being able to understand how the person owns the land and the person's ability under the law to even transfer the land to you as well. So that's another pitfall that people tend to overlook.
This is one of my last questions before I take my last questions of you. Before I take one or two questions and invite our next two panelists up to go to part two of this. Okay, so let's say you got some bad land.
Okay.
It happens.
Okay.
Right? You ran into some bad land. What does the legal dispute look like?
Okay.
What are the processes for that?
Okay. So I'm sure bad land literally means bad transaction. So
bad transaction.
Yeah. Okay.
You find out you run into somebody else, they got the same paperwork, say that they the same owner,
Okay, so the first aid to every bad transaction is you stop payment and you look for the nearest lawyer. So
stop payment, look
stop
for the nearest
payment
lawyer.
immediately and you look for the nearest lawyer. So that's the first aid. Now, let's say you get yourself locked in a bad transaction. You stop the payment immediately, look for the lawyer, and let the lawyer review all that has transpired, there are three things that can happen in every bad transaction. One is you may go to your seller and he may be willing to do what? Pay you back. And the mistake people do around that period is that when the seller says, I'll pay you back, they just go back and sleep. If the seller says he'll pay you back, get a settlement agreement with the seller.
Now, agreement when?
Agreement when? If you don't pay, what happens? Because the length of time you spend in court can be very long or can be very short based on the admission of the seller. So if the seller says, I'll pay you back, the next thing is get a settlement agreement, which says, I'll pay you, I agree that I've sold you this land, it didn't go through, I'll pay you back, I'll pay you over this period of time. If I don't pay you, this and this and this and that. So you could settle the matter. The other thing is that you can go to the police station because you could have been defrauded. And now it's even a crime under the law to sell land that does not belong to you.
Hold on, say. There is a law.
Yeah, under the Land Act, if you are to sell land that does not belong to you, it's a crime. It's actually a crime.
It's a crime?
Yeah, it's a crime.
Okay. No, so how old is that law?
No, it's a Land Act, the 2020 Land Act.
The 2020?
Land Act, yeah.
Land Act of 2020.
So,
if you sell land that doesn't belong to you, it's a crime.
If you pose and you represent yourself as owning a land that you know does not belong to you and you sell it, you've committed a crime actually.
But you still got to win the court case.
I'm coming.
I can't hear him. He's sitting next to me. It's a whole damn festival happening next door. If I would suggest you come closer. Yeah. Let me tell you something. The beautiful thing about Ghana is this could be Sunday morning at 6 a.m. That could be your bedroom window, and that could be your church next to your house. It happens. This is normal. We just so kind of used to it. This could be your bedroom window, and you didn't even know you had a church next to your house until that faithful Sunday. So if you guys are in the back, unfortunately, that is a different venue. And we can't, that's not us. Like, we didn't tell our drummers to start, FYI. That's a different venue. It must be a wedding, a funeral, or something. It's a funeral, right.
So if someone represents you as owning a land that he doesn't own and then sells the land to you, that's a crime. But there's a distinction. I'm coming. There's a distinction. Okay. So there's a difference between a good transaction gone bad and the crime of selling land that does not belong to you. Okay. It's even the case of even cars as well. So if I genuinely believe I own the land and I sell the land to you, and afterwards there's a court case, you cannot go to court. You cannot go to the police and tell the police that I've sold land which does not belong to me and all of that. But if I represent you that I own the land and there's no affiliation, no relation between me and the land
at all,
so there's no genuineness in the entire transaction, that constitutes a crime.
Gotcha.
Now, even depending on how the transaction even occurred, it could also constitute defrauding itself, which is also a crime as well. So in addition to trying to negotiate, so sometimes it could be a good transaction gone bad, which you may just settle. So there's no criminal element in there. But based on how the transaction was conducted, there could be a criminal element in there, like where you were defrauded, where the person may be forged documentation. So then you have to also involve the police as well. Then there is the civil action itself, where you can bring an action against the person who sold the land to you to recover the money that you've paid.
And none of these, well, let me just leave that alone. Okay, so I'm gonna stop there because we could literally spend this whole time going down this rabbit hole. And for those of you who are either thinking about buying land or have bought land, I really want to bring up my next two panelists in a minute after I take a few questions. so you can hear about some of their experiences, some of their best practices, some of the things that they are doing. Brother Dre Taylor was supposed to come. He can't make it because he got typhoid. But I saw Kashawn Myers walk in, so you can't hide, bro. I might have to have you join our next panel just about your own personal experience with buying land, and building. This is all personal experience. Thank you for coming too. Mama Erna.
My question is, if you have purchased land and you have a 50-year lease on it, and if when the lease is out, if you cannot renew it, what happens to what you have invested into
The house on the land. Okay, the question was, if you have a 50-year lease on the land and you build a house and you invest in the land and the 50-year lease is up, what happens to your house and your investment in the land? Great question, Mama.
Okay, so to some extent, the answer to that question depends on who you bought the land from. Because now under the law, for government land, they've put in place a framework for renewal. So there's an application process, you apply and all of that. Now, I would say the difficulty comes in with the individual owned lands and the family owned lands. But the truth of the matter is that unless you are not interested in renewing your land, ordinarily and in normal terms, you should be able to have a conversation with your lessor or your allodial to have the land renewed. Now, land goes with the building. That's a very important thing. So if you were to lose the land, you're also losing it with the buildings as well.
Hold on.
But in 8 out of 10 instances, you should be able to have your renewal conversation. Yes, it may come at a fee, but you should be able to renew the land and then have your lease extended.
I mean, it makes sense that the building go with the land. And this is not a question that you can answer, but just from the foundation of the laws, and I'm wondering, and I don't know if there was some kind of historical precedence. I don't know if something happened and then the law changed, but the idea of legacy and inheritance, right? Why would the land laws be that way? What is the point of that? What is the point of 50 years? So from Ghanaian to Ghanaian, it's 99 years, right? Mm-hmm. But it's still 99 years, right?
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So in 99 years, you could have 2 or 3 generations in a family, right? So I own the land, and then for 30 years. Mm-hmm. So now I got 70 years left. I pass it to my son, right? Mm-hmm. He take 40 years. We got 30 years left. He passed it to his son or daughter. And then 35 years later, now mind you, or 30 years, it's time for the land to be up, right? Mm-hmm. Now we've built this land up. Maybe there's apartment building. Maybe there's an apartment building on the land with other families even staying on it, a farm. And this thing has been in our family for 99 years, right? Mm-hmm. I'm trying to understand the thinking behind, after 99 years, you got to come and renegotiate that. And if they just decided, if this new family, right, decided after this time that they just have something different, they want to build a Chuck E. Cheese, right, and just decide not to renew, they can do that.
Okay. Can I answer a question?
Yes.
Okay, so a very key thing we have to notice is that the leasehold title is not necessarily a Ghanaian thing. It's a common law right.
Okay.
So it came from the English common law.
Okay.
Now,
it's an English common law right.
Now,
But
now, if you go back into time, the land regime back then was essentially, let's say, there's 2 owns the land, then you can, let's say they still knows that this is the territory they have. But if you have a daring hunter or a daring farmer, he's able to farm to a very large extent. He acquires a very extensive tract in addition. Now, it is deemed that, yes, there's two owns the land at a allodial level, but you, let's say the farmer, you have the usufructory, which was almost as equal as the allodial. Now, over time, realize that, yes, you could have, let's say, a family owning a very large piece of land, but they may not have the resources to be able to really develop it to a large extent or to the best, let's say, extent possible. That made the conversation around leasehold very, very important, because leasehold allowed non-indigents, even from various communities, to be able to come into another community and acquire a certain part of the land for a period of time. Now, you have to also understand that if you go now, you can go and just buy the land. But back then, some of these families had to fight for the land. They had to actually go battle for the land. So the idea of this whole more like graduated land regime system is to ensure that if my great-great-great-grandfather had to do battle at some point
and fight for this
land, future generations should be able to benefit from it as well.
Right. Well,
So it's a way of protecting indigents. The whole idea of having this graduated land regime that keeps on reducing over time, I mean, as you go down the ladder, is one way they have to protect the indigents as well.
The original inhabitants of the land.
You get it? Now,
Whoever the family or people was that got it from the beginning became owners.
exactly. Now, the thing about the renewal system is that ideally, you should be able to renew the land. The only instance where these allodial or lessor may try to play fun is where they try to charge you exorbitant fees. Now, back to just to talk about 1999. Back then, you could lease the land in the old, like way back, you could lease land for a very long period of time. But over time, as people got more enlightened, they realized that no, it didn't make sense leasing the land for so long. Why don't I lease it for a period of time so that some years to come, when my future generations come, they can also come and then decide what they want to do with their land.
Right.
Now, over time, 1999 became the practice for some reason. Then you have foreigners coming in, both diasporans, Europeans, all those coming in, buying these 99 and the rest. It got to a time where they were even buying the allodial as well, because you have maybe someone coming with so much money, he just pays the chief gives out the allodial. And that's the reason for the constitutional provision that truncated all foreign-owned lands to 50 years. So, like I said, there's a bit of history in there.
Okay.
Exactly. Now, to the question as to why there is not even with Ghanaians right now, like Ghana State Housing like this, they wouldn't even give you land for 99 years. So part of this whole 50, 60, 25, 35 conversation, it goes beyond just even who is buying the land to more of an economical conversation. That why don't I lease the land for a shorter period of time so that 50 years from now, my children can come and at least charge for the renewal as well and benefit from the land as well.
Understand.
So there's a bit of an economical conversation in there, or like an investment conversation in there beyond just who is buying the land.
Understood. Okay.
Okay.
Hey, man, you smarter than I thought you was in the beginning, man. This dude thorough, ain't he? Ain't no stuttering, ain't no confusion, ain't no questions. You know what he's talking about. I'm gonna take one or two more questions, and I'm gonna bring up the next panelist to get in. And just for the next one, just stay on the side.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? Because we might get some more questions. 1, 2, and then we're gonna move on. You guys speak up though, Morris.
Hello. I don't think it's on.
No, it's for his camera.
Oh, okay.
So that the question comes on the camera.
Greetings. So, I just want to be clear. When I heard the brother say, and as you said, he was very clear, that if I sign a contract for this land for 50 years, and then I develop on this land in 2 years, and I got the land for another 48, but at the end of that 48, I still have to negotiate for an extension. And there's no guarantee that they will renew my lease for that land. And if there's not a guarantee, can I add one into the contract before I ratify the deal?
Okay, so I wouldn't want to say there is no guarantee that it will be renewed. Like I mentioned, 8 out of 10 instances, when you have a lease and you go to your lessor, they'll have a conversation around the renewal. But where they can get you is a renewal fee. So they may charge you very exorbitant renewal fees. Now, what you can do to protect yourself at the time of negotiating is to have a renewal clause in there. It can be now.
No more than 3%.
Exactly. So you can have a renewal framework in there where even if let's say you have to go back to let's say your lessor and they are trying to, charge you exorbitantly, you can have some protection as well. Because where they get you is where there is no renewal framework in their contract. So now they will tell you, this is the current rate that we are charging people around this area for renewal. And it becomes a matter of negotiation. And many times than not, they wouldn't sign the renewal, they wouldn't sign the extended lease if you don't agree to pay. So it's always best that you make sure there is a renewal framework in your agreement. Now, you can also negotiate a very unreasonable renewal fee. Let's say you're buying the land now and it expires in 50 years. And you're saying that you pay maybe 10,000 Ghana cedis for renewal. There's been case law where the courts have ruled that the renewal was unreasonable. The money was too low because it was over a 50-year-old contract and it was in pesos or so. And the court was like, no, it doesn't make sense when you renew a land for pesos right now. But you can negotiate some percentage arrangement in there so the person cannot go beyond that framework. But without a percentage arrangement, unless it's a government land where you can even go to court to contest the renewal, depending on the fee that you're charged.
It's up to you. It's up
You have
to
to
you.
negotiate. You can go to court sometimes, but regardless,
You're gonna spend so much time in court.
there's more. The balance is more on the part of the seller. So if there is no renewal framework in there, as compared to if there's a renewal. If there's a renewal framework, you can go to court to enforce the renewal framework. But if there's no renewal framework, it's about you going to court to say they are being charged on a reasonable renewal fee.
Right.
But I will still come back to
So your word versus their word, no written agreement.
a bit of
no
negotiation.
contract.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Last question before we move on.
Do you have, you have the title work done, but is there title insurance? You know?
Is there?
Title insurance.
So if someone contests your title, then the title insurance will hire the attorney and pay for the attorney. The title insurance will pay for the attorney if there's a land dispute. Do you have title
Okay.
insurance?
As far as I'm aware as of now, I'm not personally aware of any insurance company that's providing that kind of coverage. But I know there are a couple of insurance
They broke
companies that if
already.
you meet
They
them,
gone broke already.
if you meet them and they
Number
have a
of claims
conversation
they
with them, they may be able to tailor something for you. But in terms of any insurance company that's offering this on a retail level, like allowing people to come for title insurance, I'm not personally aware of
And
that.
I don't think that they can have title insurance until they fix the system. There's no company that's going to be willing to insure this title without having some kind of digital way that you can, number one, assure that the title. That's the last question. So we're gonna move on to the next one. Who's that in the back? LeBlue. Okay, one more, and then we're gonna move on to the next. Until there's a systematic process you can go through to get a clean title. And that's one of the challenges, because at home we go, you go on MLS, you go on Zillow, you look up comps. Oh, this how much this sold for. I'm gonna buy this. You got your escrow, your lawyer, your closing, your this. You got all your everything set up. And here we a little bit more wild west. This is a little bit more for people who like adventure. You know what I'm saying? If you don't like adventure, I'm just telling you like it is. Some of us like it. Like I kind of like. Buy a house in the U.S., it's boring. I mean, who wants to buy a house and so safely without the possibility of losing your money? Who wants to have that kind of thing, right? Go ahead, LeBlue.
Okay, what I'd like to do first off, I have a question, but I like an exercise. I'd like to see a show of hands of how many people in this room have purchased land.
We did this in the beginning, FYI.
You did it. Now,
Yeah.
my next question, keep your hands up. How many feel like the people that they brought the land from will renew at the end of the lease? will renew. And you have that kind of faith.
It's the faith in the law.
So
Okay, so my question is though, what is the recourse? Because listening to this whole thing, there is just no way you can win here. I mean, you're talking about a whole new family in 50 years. They don't care what your deal was.
Oh, but the
50
law
years
doesn't
ago.
change.
The law, oh yeah, well tell us about the law. Yeah, we can work with that. But this is a whole new family. All they see is all this development. They have a house, they have an apartment, they have a restaurant, they have this, they have that, and all they got to do is get rid of you. So what do? There's no way you can win. Is there any way you can tell us how we can actually
How do we win? Get the strap.
Okay, so I would say there are two things that you can do. And I think Mr. Marvin mentioned, one is if you are now about to acquire the land, which I think most of you already acquired, is you get a renewal framework in there. So it could be one automatic renewal, and then also a regime, maybe a percentage arrangement sort of. Like it can't go beyond this thing, or maybe if it has to go beyond a certain percentage, it should be with the consent of both parties as well. It should be mutually agreed and all of that. For those who have already acquired land, I think the mistake people make is that they wait till probably the last year of their contract before they start negotiations. Like, at that point,
Started before.
you are a bit in a tight corner because you clearly they cannot just come and evict you. That's one thing. They cannot just come one day and just tell you to leave the land. There's a protection under the law.
You cannot be evicted.
You cannot just be evicted just like that. Now, what you can do is that you will need to start your renewal conversation probably 10, 15 years ahead of time. And
10,
even
15 years ahead of time?
Yeah. There are even instances where we even advise clients that if you acquire the land, let's say now, right? Whilst the current, let's say the chief or the current family head is still alive, go back and then do what? Renegotiate and then negotiate your renewal.
You said while the current chief is still alive.
Still alive.
Because the new chief could come in.
If there is no renewal arrangement in your contract, when you go for the renewal, it's a matter of negotiation. I feel like we saying that they will renew is a bit of a prejudiced perspective. They will definitely have conversations with you because sometimes these lands are like over acres.
Right.
If they come and say they will renew for anyone, it wouldn't work. People will go to court and all of those things. So definitely they will renew by the rate. So what you can do is that go to the current maybe family head or chief that you bought the land from and start a conversation for the renewal. Maybe 10, 15 years ahead of time. Because I will just put it from the perspective of the seller as well. Let's say my father sold you the land 50 years ago and you come to me 50 years down the line, it's only fair that I, to some extent, make sure I'm also making something out of the land. So there's a conversation that the seller too can have. For which reason they may want to charge a certain fee. But for you, the buyer, it's about starting the conversation early as possible so that sometimes the earlier you start, the more reasonable the fee that you may even pay for the renewal. Even if they are not willing to even renew for you at that point, you can even negotiate the renewal arrangement in there. That will cater for you some years from now. If it's a government land, like I mentioned, you are protected because the law has now laid down a framework for which you can enter into negotiations for the renewal of a government land. However, if it's an individual land, that is where...
And let me say this so that we can move on. That's if you care. Because some of you just might be like this shit. 99 years, I ain't going to be here. Let the kids deal with it. I told them, so I done paid the college tuition. They smart enough to deal with it themselves. Some people might just be like this. You understand what I'm saying? Let them figure it out. Or it ain't for me to deal with.
I think
I'm going to let them know what the law is. The person that...
Let me add something. So the best protection you can have is at least have a renewal clause in there. Have a renewal clause because without a renewal clause, the law is that the land transaction is like every other contract.
We're going to be here with you all day,
Sure,
bro.
all right.
Listen,
Okay.
Last question.
Okay.
Can you pass land down in an estate or will, yes or no? I know it's some intricacies, but
Okay, so there are two layers to that conversation. One is yes, and then you have to understand that when it comes to land, the laws around lands are more like, I would say, localized. So if you want to pass down land in Ghana to someone, you have to speak to a lawyer and understand the estate regime around land ownership. You can't use maybe the law maybe in another state or another country to pass down land in Ghana. So yes, you can pass down land under an estate, but you have to appreciate the regime around that. Yeah.
okay. All right, hey y'all, please let's give Mr. Kwaku Yeboah a round of applause. Man, please, I would just tell you right now, all these people gonna get your number. I need 5%. Y'all like, hey, except for your people in here who already your clients, who I know. But come on, y'all, let's give them another round of applause. Please tell us because this is going to be put on YouTube, how can people find you? Give us your website, your email address, anything. If somebody say, man, I like this dude, he thorough, I want to buy land in Ghana, and I want him to be my lawyer, how can we find you?
Okay, so you can go to my firm website, which is Benchmark Lawyers and Consultants, so www.benchmarklawghana.com. I happen to also work with Mr. Diallo. He's my client as well, but I happen to also work with him on his consultancy, which is Diaspora Certified, which is a consultancy that assists particularly diasporans who are looking to migrate, invest, and do business in Ghana. So it's more like a 360 hand-holding consultancy, guiding you with coming into Ghana, meeting the right people, the brokers, I don't want to say lawyers, but the lawyers, and all of that. So you can go through Mr. Diallo and you can come to me, or you can just go to our website. As I mentioned, my name is Augustine Kwaku Yeboah. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn or wherever on my website, I'll be available.
Thank you.
Sure.
I appreciate you. Very thorough.